same way that Nazi Germany looked back to the pagan culture of the past, Italy, too, was living on its dreams. Regarding the social tension and search for a system in Italy after the end of the First World War as an ideal opportunity, Mussolini brought together former soldiers, the unemployed, and various radical university students. Mussolini organized his supporters in a semi-military outfit known as the Black Shirts. The Black Shirts were ruthless and aggressive. They began carrying out street attacks on groups they regarded as rivals. With their Roman-style salutes, songs, uniforms, slogans, and official marches past, they provoked an emotional furor in the ignorant and despairing population. On October 29, 1922, the fascists entered Rome with 50,000 militants. Realizing that resistance in the face of this force was futile, the king charged Mussolini with forming a new government. Shortly thereafter, Mussolini closed down all the other political parties. Some opposition leaders were exiled and others imprisoned. Mussolini was regarded by the fascists as a superior, chosen being with special abilities and a special calling. Mussolini's official propaganda service told the press which photograph was to be published when, on which page, and in what size. Il Dulce was depicted in magnificent pictures as a powerful commander, or working on the harvest, or addressing young fascists, or making policy. In all these publications, Mussolini was portrayed as the man who knew best in all areas. The pages of the newspapers were full of pictures of him flying planes, taking photographs, swimming, or skiing in the Alps. The leader of fascist ideology was literally being turned into an idol. In 1935, Mussolini invaded Abyssinia without even declaring war. He regarded this conquest as necessary if he was to realize his fascist ideals. On October 2, 1935, fully equipped Italian forces attacked strategic points in the country. The use of poisonous mustard gas in populated areas caused terrible loss of life. The peace-loving populace under the leadership of King Haile Selassie were unable to resist the modern machines of war with their primitive weaponry. The result was a complete massacre. Yet despite all his military strength, Mussolini was defeated in the Second World War. Mussolini and his senior administrators were hanged. Another country struck down by fascism was Spain. Supported by Hitler and Mussolini, Franco's armies seized control after a long and ruthless war against their opponents, the Communists. Francisco Franco then installed a most repressive regime and ruled the country until 1975 with his iron fist policy. He had hundreds of thousands of his own people killed, making no allowances for the elderly, women, or children. Franco drove Spain into a major civil war in 1936. Brother fought against brother, and father against son. An average of 500 people died every day during this civil war. Incidents of violence, massacres, mass torture, and inhuman killings never ceased. The Spanish Civil War left some 600,000 dead in its wake. Hitler and Mussolini used Spain just like a laboratory as a testing ground for their weapons and troops. The most striking example of this was one village Franco made over to Hitler in return for his assistance. On the morning of May 5, 1937, the people of the town of Guernica were wiped out by a fleet of giant bombers produced by Nazi technology. The little town had been abandoned by Franco for the Nazis to test their planes with. Fascism suffered a military defeat in the Second World War. The alliance between Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Japanese fascism was defeated in the war, and the fascist regimes in all three countries were eliminated. Hitler committed suicide. Mussolini was hanged by his own countrymen, and the government in Japan dissolved itself. Fascism arose in the first half of the 20th century, but collapsed before that century had reached its halfway point. However, that collapse did not mean that fascism had been entirely eradicated from the face of the earth. Following the Second World War, fascism began growing again in the Third World countries. The dictators and juntas that seized power in Latin America and Africa basically possessed fascist ideologies. The Chilean dictator Pinochet, who staged a bloody coup d'etat against the then head of state Allende in 1973, turned the country into a lake of blood. During the military junta in Argentina, thousands of opponents of the regime disappeared. It subsequently emerged that more than 2,000 political prisoners had been loaded onto planes and thrown into the sea off the Argentinian coasts from thousands of meters high. The savagery experienced in Guatemala was terrifying. The fascist regime that in 1954 overthrew the country's first and only elected president, Jacobo Arbenz, turned the country into a killing field in the 1960s and 70s. Fascist regimes that seized power in such Latin American countries as El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, and Paraguay perpetrated unbelievable slaughter. Similar fascist regimes remained in power for many years in such African countries as